So picking up from the end of the previous chapter, Izuku is still in his coma, and All Might said that he felt that Izuku was talking to the previous users of One for All, and that is in fact what's happening here. But not just some of them, straight up all of them, or he's talking to most of them, but he literally sees every single one. And also the first time for the audience, we're seeing these characters like real time and also like interacting with Izuku. Now before we go any further, let me just get this one part out of the way because this is a subject of much contention right now, and that's the second and third users, because they're actually here as well, and for the first time they're not shadowed out or silhouetted or anything like that. However, instead of sitting down like the rest of the Vestiges, they're standing behind them facing the walls, so we can only see them from the back. And that being said, that's the only time in this chapter where there is focus put on these characters, and they never talk about them, they don't mention them, which is kind of interesting, because don't you think, be like, hey, who are those two in the back? Why are they just like doing the Blair Witch Project thing? Why aren't they sitting here with the rest of us and conversating? But the contentious thing about these characters is that, you know, maybe you've heard about it, maybe you haven't, but there's this big theory as to who these two could be. It involves some crazy time travel stuff, and essentially they may or may not be the future versions of Bakugo and Kirishima. So the second being Bakugo because he looks just like him and he has the gauntlets and a similar attire, so that's like really strange, right? The third one, of course, is supposed to be Kirishima, and we need to stretch a little bit more to make him match up with him, but the hair is kind of similar if you put it in a man bun, I suppose. I'm not here to try to convince you whether they are them or they're not. I'm just putting it out there that, you know, this is something that's going on right now, at least in the community. So besides them, we're also getting the first dialogue from the fourth and sixth users. I'll go into the fourth user in a little bit, but the sixth user is the guy that kind of looks like Inumaki from Jujutsu Kaisen. He only really has one line of dialogue here, and he says, Banjo Senpai talked to you last time, right? Now, aside from that, this guy's particularly interesting because Izuku hasn't received his quirk yet, therefore there's still a lot of mystery around him. And in the lineage of things, this is the guy who would have passed it on to Nana. But anyway, the first user starts talking, the brother of One for All, and he says, in the last 4 months, my power, One for All, has been growing exponentially, and with the increase in capabilities, profiles of the previous holders of One for All were copied and pasted, and over time we were able to communicate with one another as well. This lore was kind of started back when Izuku was talking to Banjo, the fifth user, like when he inherited the Black Whip quirk. But he goes further, saying that since the previous encounter with my brother forcing himself inside of our domain, it's become easier for us to come before you. He's talking about the sequence back in the war arc when Shigaraki finally was able to like touch Izuku and try to take One for All, but it sent them both into like the Vestige world. Then Izuku tries to talk back, but he still hasn't manifested a mouth in the Vestige world yet, so he only kind of has like this muffled communication right now. And then the fourth user steps up and he's like, I'll do the talking. My name is Shinomori Hokage. So I'm pretty sure this is the first time we're getting the name on this guy as well. And he says, your previous fight brought forth my power through your will, danger sense. Then we see the fifth user, Banjo, like having like this funny little back and forth with the fourth user when he's like, Mr. Shinomori here is a weirdo hermit who lived in the woods because he was so irritable when it came to society. This makes sense that they'd have some kind of camaraderie here because, you know, Banjo being the fifth user means that the fourth user, Shinomori, passed One for All onto him. But then he reveals that his cause of death was of old age at the age of 40. And at that time, he didn't understand why that had happened, but then he realized that through All Might receiving One for All, that it made more sense to him because obviously All Might lived to be way past 40 and he's still alive currently. But Shinomori also says that besides All Might, he was the one to hold One for All the longest. And that the 18 years that he evaded All for One, he basically trained and nurtured the power of One for All. And we see like a flashback of him like splitting a boulder. And he says that with this phenomenal strength, I realized that I would never be able to beat him in that state. I just had to nurture this power myself so that someone else could do it. So this goes back to the power stockpiler aspect of One for All. It was originally just a quirk that allowed itself to be passed on to others, but then All for One gave the first user a stockpiling quirk. And I guess it's being implied here that Shinomori is the first one to really take advantage of that aspect and spend 18 years like stockpiling power, so that it basically became the prototype to what we see All Might making the Quirk to be. And then he says, in my final year, the Quirk broke my body. At first, I thought it was a case of me having a weak constitution, at worst a chronic disease, but with All Might's existence, he would confirm all theories and suspicions for me. Me dying of old age, it meant that One For All will slowly but surely burn away the life force of any of its holders. And then it goes back to the question of, okay, so how did All Might live on longer than Shinomori? Well, it turns out that if you originally have a Quirk and you receive One For All, it basically is too much on your body and it ages you, I guess, twice as fast or somewhere around there. But with All Might, we all know that he was quirkless initially. So him being an empty vessel allowed him to receive One For All without the drawbacks of it like debilitating his body, I guess. And if you're wondering how they're figuring this out posthumously, well, the first user explains it by saying, it's with All Might, who's still alive today, that we learn this information. As a model of his subconscious relays all of the information he learns back to us. And then he further says that the idea that the portion of the Quirk user's consciousness permeates within the new user makes us wonder how and why elements of All Might's being are here, despite him being quirkless, talking about like that weird All Might energy ghost that we always see in the Vestige world. Originally, they thought that it was like the quirk factor that was stored within One For All, but since All Might didn't inherently have a quirk, why is his energy ghost a part of the core of One For All? They basically say that they don't know why this is yet, but I'm sure you can figure out where this little storyline is headed and what the inevitable explanation for it is. Another little interesting bit of information that's revealed in this sequence is they say that All Might has had One For All for 40 years. And up until this point, we've never had the age of All Might revealed. We kind of just guessed through like some context clues and stuff. But considering that he was given it in his teenage years, I guess this does mean that All Might is currently like in his 50s. But going further, the first user says that they cannot risk passing the quirk onto normal people already blessed with quirks of their own. And that with each generation, quirkless people have become more and more infrequent, which means potential applicants are limited. And that it was basically a miracle and some crazy luck that All Might was, just so happened to give All For One to Izuku, who was quirkless. And then it boils down to them saying that Izuku may be the last successor of One For All because of this. But anyway, we're coming to the end of the chapter, and after they have this discussion about One For All, Nana chimes in and she's like, hey Deku, are you able to kill Shigaraki for me? So that's pretty funny how she just hard cuts to another topic of conversation here. And it's understandable because Shigaraki is her grandson, so if anybody's going to make that request, it probably should be her. And I assume that the ultimate goal here is to just, erase All For One from existence because he is currently the holder of the original quirk / whatever it has become at this point. Now, will Izuku agree to this? Probably not. I doubt Izuku will ever kill anyone or willingly kill anyone, so he'll probably just say the standard stuff of like, I'll find another way to save him or, something like that. Or maybe he does. I think that would be interesting as well. But let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.